At this point, all travelers really need to be aware of the impact that the luxury of travel is having on the environment. So in this video, I'm going to tell you some ways that you can visit London and make sure you're keeping your environmental footprint as low as possible. Now, I do understand that some of the things I'm about to talk about are dependent on what your budget is, but it's not about being perfect. It's about continuously trying to make little changes as much as possible. My personal philosophy is that travel is a luxury, so I always try to make sure that I'm reducing my impact as much as possible. And when there's added cost or added convenience to be able to do that, it takes the sting out a little bit, because at the end of the day, it's something that I feel very lucky to be able to do. Okay, so let's start with carbon offsetting. So for most of you, your flight to London is probably going to be the biggest impact that you have on the environment through your London trip. And it's also, for most people watching this, probably pretty unavoidable that you're going to have to take a plane to get here. So what I'd recommend that you do is carbon offsetting. There are organizations that let you carbon offset, which means that you enter in the information about your flight and travel class you traveled in, where you flew from, and the organization calculates how much you personally contributed carbon-wise into the air through your flying. And from that calculation, they attribute amount of money to that, and that money you pay to the organization for them to put into projects that will offset that carbon emission. So for example, your money will go into helping to plant more trees that will help to clear the air of carbon. Some airlines now are giving you the option when you book your flight if you want to do that through them. I personally choose not to do that just because, I don't know, these are really big companies and I don't actually know where that money is going to go, and I prefer instead to go through more local, smaller organizations where there's a lot more transparency as to how they're going to be using your funds. It's actually also not that much money. So I just did my carbon offsets for all of my flights for 2019, and I paid £133 for 10 one-way flights, and actually 5 of those were in business class. And like I mentioned, being able to fly is a luxury, especially when I'm doing it for a holiday, so I'm prepared to have to pay in order for me to be able to have a little bit less harm on the environment. Now, carbon offsetting isn't going to cure the planet of all of the carbon that's being emitted into the air from flying, but it's absolutely better than doing nothing. You can also do this for any taxi travel that you do while in London, as well as any public transportation. But of course, the costs are going to be really low because your personal contribution to emitting carbon into the air is going to be so small when you're using public transport. Bring your own utensils on your flight. If you're flying in economy, you're probably still gonna be given plastic cups and plastic forks and knives for eating your meal. I hope these airlines kind of get with it and figure out something else to be able to use instead of just this one-time use plastic. What you can do is bring your own utensils onto the plane and refuse the plastic ones. So bring your own fork and knife and your own cup, which you can refill. Of course, the knife is going to be a bit of a problem. Technically, you're only supposed to bring a butter knife, so either bring a butter knife from home or you can use plastic. So if you already have maybe a set at home from takeaway that you got or something, you can use that. Or just use a fork. No one's eating steak in economy class, or probably any class to be fair. So also bring your own headphones. Don't forget your headphones, because otherwise you're gonna be using those plastic ones that come in like 4 layers of plastic wrap, and then they just get thrown out at the end of the flight. Use public transportation. Kind of a no-brainer, but I do know that a lot of people come to London and they get too nervous to navigate the tube and the bus, so they end up taking taxis everywhere. So obviously it's not great for the environment if you use taxis all the time, plus it gets very expensive, especially if you're gonna be sitting in rush hour traffic. So instead, just educate yourself on how to use public transport before you come to London, and I promise you will be able to figure it out and you'll be totally fine, and you can reduce your impact on the environment. I, of course, have tons of videos about how to use public transportation in London, which I will leave a link to in the description of this video. But I also have a course over on Bright Trip that goes very in depth on how to use all forms of public transportation and everything you need to know before you get to London about public transport, so you literally will know everything before you arrive. Use electric taxis and Uber pools. So for the times when you need to use an Uber, let's say from the airport or if it's late at night, I'm not saying you can't take a taxi. That's completely fine. I still take Ubers, I still take taxis as needed. But there are a couple of things you can do to reduce your environmental impact when you need to take one. The first is to use Uber Pool. You tell Uber that you want to take a pool and you get a reduced rate, so it's cheaper, but also you will likely share a ride with somebody on the way to your destination who's kind of going along the same route. So instead of both of you having two different cars, you share one car, and that helps to reduce the amount of petrol being used and the amount of carbon that's emitted into the air. Also, if you use black taxis, all new black taxis in London now have to be electric 100%. So nobody's getting any of the older black taxis that are very bad for the environment. If you want to take a black taxi, all you have to do is just try to hail one that is an electric one. And you can kind of tell they're electric because they look like way more futuristic than the classic ones. And also they're very, very quiet. Obviously, your trip is going to have a much lower impact on the environment if you're in an electric car. Refuse one-time use items. London's been really good at trying to crack down on one-time use items like coffee cups and straws, to the point where actually a lot of venues in London will not give you a plastic straw anymore. But if you're gonna be ordering a drink, it always helps to ask the server if you can have either no straw or a paper straw. But also, if you need a plastic straw because you have a disability or you need it for your children or something like that, then most places will still have plastic straws for you. That's completely fine, and please ask for it if you need it. But if you don't need a plastic straw, then just ditch it altogether. Also, takeaway coffee cups are a really big thing now because, in case you didn't know, they are not recyclable and for the most part not compostable. There are some that are compostable, and a lot of places are advertising that they have compostable cups, but the problem is that they have to be put in a compost for that to be effective, otherwise they're just gonna go to the landfill. So a couple of things you can do. First off, if you actually go to a coffee shop, instead of getting a takeaway option, just take 10 minutes and sit down and have your drink in. Most places will just give you a ceramic mug instead of a takeaway cup. Other option is to bring your own reusable cup. And actually a lot of venues around London are giving customers discounts for having their own reusable cup instead of having to take one from them. So bring one around with you if you love to have your coffee or your tea on the go. They have really nice ceramic ones that you can carry around, or I've also just found that there are collapsible ones that you can just stick into your pocket, or if you into like a small bag, so you don't have to carry the mug around with you. It goes very compact, very small. Bring a reusable shopping bag. So a couple of years ago, the UK put a tariff on plastic bags where people, if they wanted a new plastic bag, they had to pay 5p for them. And it actually worked. Within a year, there was 85% less use of plastic bags, which is awesome. If you go to the grocery store and you don't have a bag with you, you can buy what's called a bag for life. They're usually around like 20p now. And the idea is that you're supposed to reuse it and bring it back to the shop. Alternatively, you can bring your own canvas bag or any bag that you have from home, and then you don't have to buy one, and you can reuse it over and over again. Also remember to bring it if you plan on just going like clothes shopping or just plan on picking up anything, and that way you don't have to use one of their bags. Shop secondhand. So if you want to pick up some clothing or accessories or homewares while you're in London as a souvenir, the most eco-friendly way to do this, and also a lot of times the most affordable, is to shop secondhand. And there are tons of secondhand shops in London, especially for clothing, as well as vintage shops. So you can get amazing pieces to help you remember your trip of London without having to buy something brand new. I do have a couple of videos that will help you with shopping secondhand. I have one that is about some great vintage shops to go to, and one that points out some of the shops that I love to go to for secondhand clothing that was donated to charity, and then the charities sell them in these charity shops. And I'll leave links to those down in the description box. Support sustainably operated businesses. The second best alternative to buying secondhand is to buy from sustainably operated shops and restaurants and businesses. These places are working to reduce their environmental impact in order to serve you better and not ruin the planet while doing so. A couple of clothing shops that I love are Wolf & Badger in Coldrops Yard. There's also the Keep Boutique in Brixton. And a fantastic low-waste restaurant is Cub in Hoxton. And for more recommendations, make sure you watch the other videos in the Sustainable London series that this video is a part of. Use digital travel guides. So instead of buying one of those traditional paper travel guides that a bunch of trees had to be cut down to make and to give to you, use digital travel guides that can sit right on your phone or on your iPad. This is why my 3-day London itinerary is digital, because I didn't want to cut down a bunch of trees to be able to give you a great itinerary for your trip. So if you do get the itinerary, polite reminder to not print it out, please. Plus, digital guides are much easier to carry around. They just sit on your phone instead of having to lug like a 200-page guide around with you. Go veggie or vegan. London is one of the best places to eat vegetarian or vegan because almost every restaurant now has some really good options for people who are trying to eat less meat and less dairy. The meat and dairy industry, unfortunately, are some of the biggest emitters of carbon into the atmosphere. So even if you opt to go for a couple of meals where you go meat-free, dairy-free, or fish-free, then you actually are significantly reducing your environmental impact. Now, there are loads of places in London that are fully veggie or fully vegan, but as I said, most restaurants also have some really good options, at least that are vegetarian. However, the fully veggie and the fully vegan places usually are very good because they are really inventive with like the types of dishes that they create, and they love to remake comfort foods that usually involve fish or meat and make them into veggie versions that are still really yummy and tasty. A couple of recommendations that I have that I like is Mildred's in Soho, which is fully vegetarian, and also the Wild Food Cafe in Neal's Yard, which is fully vegan, and that is included in my 3-day London itinerary. If you have it, it's on day 2. This video is part of my Sustainable London series where I'm showing you all the ways that you can visit London while not ruining the planet. So you can watch the rest of the series by clicking the box that's popping up right below me.